Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I am Kate Kite, the Continuing Education Coordinator for Illinois Heartland Library System. And I have just a couple of quick um, housekeeping tasks. Please make sure that you are muted and that your video is off during the presentation. It also helps us to record attendance if you can change your name to your first name and your library, or your first name and last name, so we can give you credit for joining us here this morning. So I am going to be monitoring the chat. This is being recorded, and I'll be monitoring the chat for Dalton, and we will take questions at the end. And let me introduce our presenter this morning and turn it over. So, Dalton S is a talented information specialist and educator with a diverse background in language, library science, and community engagement. He holds multiple degrees, including an MAT from National Louis University, an MSLIS in Library and Information Science from the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, and an MA in French and Francophone Studies from the University of Illinois at Chicago. Dalton's professional experience includes serving as a dedicated teacher in Chicago public schools. He is also a continuing education instructor at City Colleges of Chicago, where he develops and delivers a variety of curricula, showcasing a commitment to lifelong learning. In addition to these professional roles, Dalton is deeply involved in community initiatives that highlight his passion for the environment. He is the owner and operator of Buck's Honeybees, LLC, a Chicagoland urban apiary specializing in sustainable practices and pollinator advocacy. Further demonstrating his commitment to environmental stewardship and community empowerment, he coordinates the beekeeping and tree ambassador programs at El Paseo Community Garden. He holds a master beekeeper certification from the University of Montana and is Openlands Treekeeper number 1873. When out in nature, Dalton enjoys baking, reading, and spending quality time with his beloved cat and rabbit. And in addition to all of these other wonderful things, Dalton is here to present to us today on Illinois Notary Public Best Practices. So thank you all for joining us, and thank you, Dalton, for being here. And I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks so much. What an intro. I have a lot to live up to. So I figure we can just dive right in. I will give kind of what I consider the most important points and then open it up to any questions that are floating out there. A couple of you submitted questions in advance, so I'll be sure to touch on those as well. But before I even advance the slides, I just want to say that this is a not an easy profession, and so I just want to thank you for serving the public of Illinois. As you know, you play such a critical role in deterring fraud and ensuring the integrity of all of our record-keeping systems, basically. So, both as librarians and notaries, thank you so much for all that you do. So, without further ado, let's dive in here and talk a little bit about, we can't talk about best practices without talking about being impartial, right? So we've got to do everything that we can do to remain neutral and unbiased. And that means at the end of the day that if you have a personal interest, whether that's personally or financially, we're not going to touch those documents, right? We're going to go find another notary. And that includes if you're named in the transaction anywhere at all, if you aren't sure, it's best to exercise caution and go ahead and find another notary who can help you out. And you're like, how do I find another notary? Um, there is a directory held by the Secretary of State on their website, but also there are several private directories out there. I know my information is listed on, like, for example, I'm just throwing one out there, the American Association of Notaries. So there are several that you could go to help get someone connected with another notary as just a professional courtesy. And it's great if you can establish a relationship with another notary, especially ones whose skills differ than a little bit from your own. For example, speaking another language, but we'll get into some of that in just a moment. So I just want to reiterate, if any point, anything I say, you need clarification, please just throw that in the chat. I'm happy to clarify. But hopefully, so far, so good. All right, we got to talk about verifying that identity, and this is where I end up getting a lot of questions. So you want to, first of all, let's just get the easiest one out of the way, personal knowledge. And there is no codified standard of personal knowledge, and so it's for you to use your professional judgment. So I tell my students, if you are 100% sure that the person is who they say they are, go ahead and proceed with the transaction. If you have any doubt, just ask for an ID. It's as simple as that. And so there's no like, you have to have known this person for 3 months, or 12 months, or 15 years. There's no particular timeline. Um, I always give the example, someone that I met 3 weeks ago, I'm not going to mark personal knowledge down, but my best friend for over 5 years now, like 7 years now, I guess, I know very well that he is who he says he is, so I'm not going to ask for the ID, right? Um, so that's for personal knowledge. And that's one of the things that you can mark down in your journal. And I will certainly talk a little bit about the journal in just a little while as well. But uh, one of the ways that you can mark that you have identified someone is just personal knowledge. Just put personal knowledge there, right into that column. As far as types of IDs go, so you want your ID to be federally or state issued, or it can be issued by a consulate. So we're talking Illinois driver's license, Illinois state ID, passport are going to be your most common. Every once in a while, I'm in the Chicago region, so one of the big consulates up near me is the Mexico consulate, and they issue an ID card as well. So as long as it's issued by a federal or state government or consulate, you are good to go. Um, there's another way. If you're still doubtful, you aren't sure, and you really want to try to um, proceed with the transaction, you can identify your signer through a credible witness as well. And so a credible witness is someone who is absolutely sure that they person is who they say they are. And so to use a credible witness, you will basically have an extra person joined in to the session as well. And they'll have to raise their hand and take an oath or affirmation as to the person's identity. And you'll need to identify them in the same way that you identify a regular signer. So they need to present their ID, their driver's license or passport or consular ID card to you. You could also put personally known for your credible witness if you do personally know that credible witness. So you'll ask them. I often get a question like, what's the difference between an oath and an affirmation? An oath is swearing to a higher power, and an affirmation is on your own personal honor. So you can ask them, would you like to take an oath or would you like to take an affirmation? And they're going to say, what's that? What's the difference? And you can just explain. So, you know, do you swear that this person is who that they say they are, so help you God, or do you affirm on your own personal honor that you know this person as blank? There's no language that's required either. So there's plenty of examples on there, online out there that you could use. So that's how it goes as far as verifying identity. It does need to be current, the ID, and it does need to be physically in front of you. So no copies, no photos, nothing like that. It does need to be the original. So there are a myriad of reasons that someone might not have an ID, and credible witness is the way to go after that. As far as if your library offers a service where folks can walk in and get something notarized, that's a little bit different than setting up the appointment in advance. If someone is setting up the appointment in advance, I go ahead and, ask them, do you have a current physical ID that you could bring in? And then if they don't, we can, oh, is there someone who does have an ID that can come in and take an oath or affirmation as to your identity? Whereas if they just walk in, it's a little bit different situation, and you'll just want to be patient, of course. Your customer service is wonderful, I'm sure. Explain the requirements and that they can come back either with an ID or with the person who can take an oath or affirmation as to their identity. Um, let's talk a little bit about making sure that everyone is actually there. So one of the biggest mistakes is someone brings in a document and someone has already signed and then they sign, but the other party isn't present. So at the end of the day, everyone whose name is on that transaction needs to be physically in front of you, whether that is in person or on the computer screen. Um, and I just saw a question in the chat that I just will go ahead and address because it's a great one. Do they have to live at the address on their ID? I usually, when I am identifying someone, that is not a question that comes up. So I mark the address um, on their ID in my journal, and if they say that they have another address, um, then that would be something that you could also note in their your journal as well. But it's not necessarily, I'm not quizzing them on their address or anything like that. In an ideal world, sure, but also think of like a passport or something that doesn't even have an address on there. Um, so never, ever, ever, ever notarize a signature that was made outside of your presence. And I put a little asterisk here. Where acknowledgments are the only type of notarization that can be signed in advance, as long as you ask that person to acknowledge that the signature is theirs and they made it knowingly and willingly. And so you have to go into that. Remember, you can't notarize anything without a notarial certificate, without notary wording at the bottom. It's usually at the bottom, at the end of the document. And so you go through there. Oftentimes there aren't titles, right? If you attach a separate certificate to the back, you're going to see those titles. But if they're embedded within the document themselves, you have to go in and look for the buzzword. So for an acknowledgement, it would be acknowledged before me on. So if you see acknowledged before me on, they can have signed in advance. But oftentimes, signers aren't familiar with the different types of notarizations. Your three most common are going to be acknowledgments, oaths and affirmations, and then signature witnessing. So um, they aren't familiar with which one. So I just usually, if I talk to them in advance, I say just hold off on signing until you're in front of me, and that way you're good to go no matter what. Because if for some reason they were to bring a oath or affirmation in front of you, which is we say and or in there, but it's actually just one type of notarization. Um, and they had signed it in advance, that would not be permissible. So they would need to get another copy and re-sign in front of you. So they have to sign in front of you, um, and for all types other than the acknowledgement. All right. Um, I had a good question about the ink color, which is a fantastic question. Blue or black ink is permissible for signing, but your stamp must be in black ink. And I'll reiterate that in a little while too. But as far as the writing on the document, it can be in blue or black ink. Either is fine. When you take courses, and they're stressing black ink, they're really stressing that your stamp, your seal has to be in black ink, which is true for the state of Illinois. And the reason why they're stressing that so much is because other states have red ink, for example, or a green ink, a different color of ink. And so each state actually has their own administrative code on notarizations, which is why it varies so much. So you might hear different things. We're talking about Illinois today, of course. So. All right. So make sure everyone is in front of you. Make sure you have identified everyone satisfactorily, whether that's through an ID or uh, credible witness or through personal knowledge. And then um, we just have to put everything in that journal. So this used to be optional. It used to be best practice, highly suggested. Highly suggested. That is no longer the case. As of January 1st, 2024, all notarizations must be documented in your notarial journal. You can use an online or paper journal, totally up to you. Um, and it is that may be something that you want to consult. If you're notarizing in the library, you may want to consult about. But it does belong to you unless you are working in an attorney's office. That journal belongs to you, and you should be the only one using it. So if you have multiple notaries in your library or business, I would highly suggest each person having their own journal. If you catalog or note notarizations in another system, I would also go ahead and put it in your own personal journal as well. You are responsible for that journal and keeping it safe and secure for 7 years after the last act chronicled. So theoretically, this has never happened to me, and knock on wood, in the many hundreds or thousands of notarizations I've done in my life. Um, the Secretary of State has never asked me for an entry in them, but the Secretary of State could ask you to produce an entry from your journal up to 7 years later after the last act chronicled in it. So it's very important to keep that journal. And just I would just use one of the standard journals. Personally, I use I'm not an influencer, so I get no kickbacks or benefits from this. I'm just telling you what I do personally. I use the electronic journal from the American Association of Notaries, so IllinoisNotary.com. The journal requirements are codified. It is very, very clear what must be in the journal and kind of the format of the journal. So you can't just use like a spiral notebook or something like that. I would go on and either I have a couple over here on this shelf, either get a paper journal from one of the notary suppliers or go ahead and subscribe to. Um, the electronic journal. When journals were made mandatory, I noted that the address was not required. I haven't been noting it in my journal. Do I need to start? Um, for me, it depends. On the type of notarization itself, and if for some reason that could be useful in the future. And so at the end of the day, it depends on if you have access to that. And so one of the things that I will do is note the location of the notarization at least if I don't have access to their address, because they may not have an address. And at the end of the day, that's one other thing for us, another piece of personally identifiable information that we've got to protect. So I totally understand not. Um, so the very unsatisfactory answer of it depends. And one thing that I would do as far as noting things in your journal, I would never note like the driver's license or ID number itself or passport number or whatever it happens to be. You can go ahead and note the expiration date. That would be a good thing to note. So you could put like, in the ID section, you could put Illinois driver's license expires, June 7th, 2026, whatever it happens to be. But don't put the number itself in case someone were to get their hands on that journal. Another thing is that if you buy one of the just market journals, they're marketed to several states. It usually does have a place for a fingerprint. Never take a fingerprint in the state of Illinois. So you should never be taking a fingerprint in the state of Illinois for certain real estate transactions that used to be required, but those laws, as to my knowledge, have been repealed, and you no longer need to take a fingerprint. So no need to carry around that um, ink pad and wipes or anything else. So one less thing to have to worry about. Any other questions? Are we good on the journal? Throw them in the chat if they come up. But just note that every notarization does need to be chronicled, and I know it can be a lot, and oftentimes people I get a lot of, I know, but at the end of the day, it is also a protection for you. You can go back to that journal and reference, ah, yes, I did notarize John Smith's signature on July 6th, or no, I absolutely did not notarize that. Someone got a hold of my stamp um, somehow and did that. So, um, does witness info need to be in the journal? Fantastic question. Yes, absolutely. So anyone involved in the transaction, go ahead and put their information in your journal. So they're lined and numbered typically. That's one of the requirements. And so, for example, if your signer was number one, and then you had, excuse me, everyone, my cat is joining us. If you had a credible witness, for example, you would put that under the next line, and then in the note section at the end, you could put credible witness for signer number one or whatever line they happen to be on. So yes, any witnesses, whether it's a credible witness or a witness to the document itself, I would go ahead and put their information in the journal as well. Great question. Great question. All right, use your seal correctly. This more or less goes without saying, but a seal is required for notarization, so no completing notarizations if you've left it at home or whatever the case may be. It is your exclusive property and it must be kept in a safe place for unauthorized use. So make sure you only use black ink, as we've already discussed. And I do want to note one other thing. Um, that is that your journal and seal belong to you. Even if your employer pays for it, you can, after your hours of work, outside of work, for example, you can take that and perform notarizations yourself. You are a public official in the state of Illinois, so your employer can't prohibit you from notarizing outside of work, for example. So on that note, just make sure it stays very safe. And I have a little, it's almost like a bank bag, and it has a latch on top, and I keep mine latched and locked. And if you have a lockable drawer, that is a fantastic place to put that in. But you don't want people to start going rogue with either your stamper journal and notarizing things that you're not aware of. So can't stress this part enough. One question that I always get is, what about if there's not enough room for my stamp? Um, and that is a fantastic question. So you never want your stamp or your seal. We use this words, the term stamp and seal interchangeably. You never want your stamp to cover any words or signature, any text at all. So if there's not enough room for your stamp, in that case, that is an excellent situation where you can attach a loose leaf certificate to the back, and on the certificate, within the document itself, you can say see attached. And then there are many online that you can just go and print one off really quickly. In that case, you don't need to ask the signer. So just be very careful. We'll talk a little bit about the unauthorized practice of law, but just be very careful to not make any suggestions. So if someone brings you a document and it does not contain a notarial certificate or it does not contain notarial language, um, you'll let them know that, and you can explain the different types of certificates and their purpose, but you can't suggest one to them. But in this case, you don't need to do that. You would just attach the same one that was already on the document itself. So if it's an acknowledgement and there's not enough room for your stamp, the person creating the document wasn't aware that Illinois stamps are, one by 2.5 inches, then you can go ahead and attach that loose leaf one on the back and do it as permanently as you can, aka with the stapler. I know that, you know, I'm I live in the real world. I know you can very easily unstaple two pieces of paper, but just do it as permanently as you can with a stapler so that that certificate stays with the document. All right. What you cannot do, I already just briefly mentioned that. Make sure that you're not offering legal advice. Ministerial officers in the state of Illinois are different than discretionary officers. Discretionary officers use their judgment, whereas ministerial officers, our duties are prescribed by law and administrative code. So, very codified. Do not explain the contents of a document, provide opinions, or help fill out any legal forms unless you're also a licensed attorney. Um, Something that more often than not, it's very interesting. Someone will come to you and ask for a certified copy, and that is not something that Illinois notaries are permitted to do. If they need like a certified copy of their birth certificate, for example, they must go to the county and get that. So no certified copies. Of course, don't use anyone else's seal. It has their name on it anyway, and your signature won't match. So, um, just don't do that. And I hope it goes without saying, but if for some reason your commission is suspended, you know, you're not permitted to keep notarizing after that. So, if someone asks for a certified copy, I would just explain that that's not something that you are permitted to do. It's not one of your duties, and you can help them look up, the registrar in the county or wherever your location might have what they're looking for, such as birth certificates. Fees. I can talk a little bit about the repercussions for overcharging. Many of you probably won't if you're in the library, but if that is something that you are doing for non-electronic acts, that is going to be a maximum of $5. There are other considerations, like if you're a mobile notary and you're out performing notarizations out and about and you're traveling to the client, you can charge fees for that. But for the notarization itself, it's a maximum of $5 per certificate, so per notarization. And then if you're doing electronic notarizations, the maximum is going to be $25. I would imagine that in many of your cases, you're going to be doing traditional wet signatures, pen and paper, notarizations. But if electronic notarizations are something that you happen to offer, the maximum for those is 25. And then if you are charging, just to be sure to provide an itemized receipt for any services you provide. And you do not have to charge at all. As many of you probably know, you do not have to charge. If for some reason you do make a mistake, no worries. We are librarians, but we are human. So just cross through that error. Please don't scribble it out. It needs to be legible under there. Initial and date that change. If it is like a larger error and you can't reasonably cross it out, just cross through the whole certificate, all of the notarial language, and say see attached, and then go ahead and attach a new one on the back. There's no sweat about that. However, if it's signed and sealed, do not make any changes at that point. You would want to cross out or destroy the document and start over. I always get questions about language barriers, and there are differing opinions out there, especially between me and the official stance. But I would, if you cannot communicate with a signer, I would assist them in finding a notary with whom they can communicate. So I would go to one of those directories. So, for example, if you searched illinoisnotary.com, there's a directory on there, and you can filter it out by language and assist them that way. As far as languages, sorry, excuse me, as far as documents in another language, if you can read and understand it, you are good to go. As you heard in my introduction, I do speak French, and so I do a fair amount of French notarizations, no problem. Um, if you do not speak that language, if the notarial certificate is in English or a language you can understand, you can go ahead and go through with that notarization. Remember, you're only responsible for the notarial certificate. You're only responsible for the notarial language. And so if you can read and understand that part, you're good to go. So if someone brings in a document that, for example, is in Spanish and you don't read or understand Spanish, but the notarial certificate is in English, you can go ahead and continue with the notarization because you can read and understand the certificate, as long as you can communicate with the signer. And then some of you may be offering remote or electronic notarizations. I don't expect this to be the most popular thing, but I just do want to note that in Illinois, they are two different things. So remote notarizations are performed via audio video communication on things such as Google Meet or Zoom or Skype, and the signer must physically be located in Illinois during those notarizations, and they must attest to that fact on the recording. Electronic notarizations, they do not necessarily have to be in the state of Illinois. Those are done entirely online. Remote notarizations, they're holding up a document to the screen and signing it and then mailing it or faxing it or emailing it to you. Whereas electronic is 100% on the computer. You do not receive any mail or email or fax or things like that. Um, for electronic notarizations, you can only complete these through an approved system provider. So there's a list on the Illinois Secretary of State's website. And you've also got to have a $25,000 surety bond in addition to the $5,000 one um, that is required for traditional. The same thing goes for the recording and for electronics, just like the journal. Those electronic recordings have to be maintained for 7 years. And then if it's a remote notarization, that recording needs to be maintained for 3 years. And then for remote notarization, say you witness it over Google Meet or Zoom or what have you, they've got to transmit the document to you within the day after signing, no later than the day after signing. So they need to get that in the mail or scan it and email it or fax it to you no later than the day after the signing. And then you have 24 hours to get that back to them once you have received that document. So you would notarize and then um, get it back to them. If the signers only speak Spanish, but the document they are signing is in English, are we allowed to notarize if they do not understand what they are signing? So they need to understand, it's their responsibility to understand the document itself. And so I would not notarize anything where you were in doubt that they were signing knowingly or willingly. However, um, if, for example, they brought in a document that is in Spanish, but the notarial language part was in English, that's a little bit different story. You could explain the certificate part, but if you suspect that they are not aware of what they are signing, do not move forward with the notarization. That's a polite decline situation. We occasionally get patrons that come in with a paper in English, Spanish speaking staff on the ground. That is a very fine line and one that I should probably not answer as a non-attorney. So um, that would be a very fine line between providing legal advice. Um, and so notaries also aren't permitted to perform translations. So um, I get wanting to help the patron and wanting to assist the patron, and we need to make access as easy as possible, right? But at the end of the day, I would try to find them a Spanish-speaking notary in this instance instead of involving another party. That would be my official answer. I believe that is it as far as slides go. I want to make sure that I answered all of the questions that you had um, submitted as well. One person came in with a handwritten document in a foreign language that did not have a certificate. If we have examples of their certificate, could they choose the certificate and we could sign? That is exactly what you should do. You should explain that you cannot notarize anything without a notarial certificate. You can explain the different types of certificates. They could choose one, and then as long as you were able to satisfactorily identify them, you can go ahead and proceed with the notarization. No no copy certifications allowed in Illinois. They need to go to the county and get a copy of a birth certificate or something like that. Illinois notaries are not permitted to certify copies. The only thing that Illinois notaries are allowed to do is that if it was an electronic notarization, they could attest to the fact that that electronic notarization was then printed out. That's almost a copy, but not really. So no certifying copies in the state of Illinois for as far as notaries are concerned. Um, I'm looking at the list of questions that you all sent. Thank you for them. It helped me tailor these materials to you. Minor for as far as minors receiving notarizations, you just need to be able to identify them in the same way you would any other signer, and their guardian should be present as well. I have a certificate stamp. Can I use that? Ah, like a stamp that puts the certificate on there, on the document itself? Sure, sure. I'm personally not a fan, because I'm not very good at making it clear and legible, but absolutely. Could we not acknowledge that this was a true copy of the ID? No, no copy certification in any way. Please keep your questions coming. They're fantastic.
And no, so this is Kate. If you are in the audience and you would prefer to ask your question verbally, we have no problem with you unmuting yourself and asking that way as well.
Where would you direct someone? Like if they needed a copy certified, like if it's like oftentimes people need a copy a certified copy of their birth certificate. They need to go to the county where they were born, and do that if they were born. A driver's license copy, then they need to explain that that's not some, they need to go to the person who's requesting that document and explain that that's not something that's permitted in the state of Illinois. I know it's frustrating. There's really no good administrative answer to that question. Like I had a recent client who needed a certified copy of some identification documents for another country, and there was a misunderstanding that that can happen in Illinois. That just is not something that notaries public are permitted to do. as certified copies. Um, I would not write anything out. I would print off another copy as far as not having a certificate. So I would just search, Illinois notary acknowledgement or Illinois notary oath affirmation and print that out and attach it to the back. But you've got to explain the different types and they've got to be the one to choose it, right? You can't give legal advice and say, oh, yes, you need an oath or affirmation for this. Let me just get that for you. You can explain it, they can choose which one it is, and you could print it off for them. Um, if person from another state brings a document that requires a notary stamp and seal, the seal is the thing we do not have and should refer them to their own state notary. So, you can notarize anything from another state, uh, as long as in the venue of the notarial certificate, so state of, county of, you would cross through that and write, state of Illinois, county of Cook in my example, and just go ahead and notarize it. Most notars, I would say, all states should recognize other states' notarizations. As far as the United States is concerned, there is a treaty where even other countries, I believe it was in 1968, other countries recognize American notarizations as well, and that's as far as apostille stamp. So, if they needed an apostille stamp, that is something that, or an apostille seal, that is something provided by the Secretary of State, and so you would complete the notarization as usual and then direct them to the Secretary of State's office where they pay a $2 fee. And so if they aren't near Springfield or Chicago, they can mail that document in along with the application and the fee in a prepaid envelope and then have it mailed back to them. Another country's passport copies aren't allowed, but where should we refer them to? They've got to contact the person that's requesting those documents and explain that that's not something that they can get done in Illinois and see if there's any other way that they can move forward. If a patron brings in a document that doesn't have any sign of needing it notarized, no notarial wording whatsoever, but insists that they were told that the paper needs to be notarized, we should use a separate notary certificate. Yes, exactly. So you explain the different types of certificates. They can choose one, but you cannot notarize something that does not have notarial language on it. They must choose a certificate and then you can notarize it. As far as like they insist they have to get a certified copy of something, I hear you. I absolutely hear you. I would refer them to the index department of the Secretary of State. If they are just not, if they are insisting with you, it is not something that Illinois notaries have the power to do. You cannot certified copies of documents. You could, say that I'm so sorry. It's not within my power to do that. The frustration lies in that notaries in other states are, and so they're like, "But I got it done, wherever." And yes, but we are not wherever. We're in Illinois, and so it is a huge frustration. We need a solution, and I guess we start lobbying for a solution to that, whether that be that notaries receive that power or some other official receives the power to certify copies. But it is, at this point in time, it is not Illinois notaries. So I would refer them to two places. To reiterate, I would refer them to the index department of the Secretary of State, who can explain to them that notaries public are not permitted to certify copies. And then I would ask them to get in touch with the person that's requiring those certified copies, the entity that's requiring those copies, and explain that that's not something permitted in Illinois. And is there any other way that they could, you know, submit evidence? Sometimes we get documents where the notary has to say that they know the signer personally. Is that something we can notarize? The document says something along the lines of, I know the principal personally. Um, I oftentimes I would not say that I know them personally. You can say, um, I have I have I have personal knowledge, along those lines. If you have uh, used their ID, for example, to ID them. But if it says like I know this person personally, that's not very good notarial language. And if that's not true, then I would not sign it. Um, and so the problem here lies within the fact that each state has their own administrative code, right? And so the wording might vary that as far as from certificate to certificate. And so they're more or less going to be the same. Um, but I, so I just would search um, online. There's no specific website. The notary There is no specific wording required in the state of Illinois. So if you will go and look on the Secretary of State's website and look at the notary handbook, there are examples of the different types of, that's something that you should be intimately familiar with anyway. So if you aren't, please do go and download that and give it a read through. There are examples of the different types of certificates in there. And there the like major notary suppliers like American Association of Notaries or National Notary Association, they sell the stamps that have the certificates on them, and they also sell the pads. It's like a tear off. Um, and an attendee just put in the chat Notary of America on there. That is if it is one that I have seen before, I know exactly which one it is, and it has that is one of the examples that I give my students as well for the sample forms. And thank you for very much for providing that example. I just don't want to be prescriptive in saying that this is the one that you have to use because there are no, it's not codified where this is exactly what it has to say. So in the handbook, there are examples, and that's what I like to go off of since that's, the official guidance from the index department of the Secretary of State. And I will also say that they are busy people, but they are usually very helpful and very kind people over at the index department. So if you aren't sure of something, give them a ring, search index department, Illinois Secretary of State, and give them a call. And they are usually more than happy to help you out. There are also various hotlines that, like if you are a member of um, one of the notary associations, there are hotlines that you can call if you get into a pickle. When minors don't have an ID and has a credible witness, can you check the ID of the witness and that will work? The witness doesn't have to be personally known by the minor and the notary. The witness absolutely has to be personally known by the minor. Like that person is taken an oath or affirmation that they know that that person is who that they say they are, but they don't have to be personally known to you. They can provide the ID um, just like you would. So if for in this example, if the minor does not have an ID, you could absolutely use a credible witness to identify them. That credible witness must know the minor and must prove to you either through your own personal knowledge or through an ID that they are who they say they are. And so that's what you would note in your journal as well. So you would put over in the notes section, minor, no ID, and then when you fill out the information for the credible witness, you could put, credible witness for John Smith, minor, in there. Yeah, these are fantastic questions, folks. Give you a second to type them in here. I know it may take a second to type. And I just looked back through the list of questions that you had submitted in advance, and I think I covered all of them. But if I haven't, please let me know. I'm more than happy to do so. So, but I wanted to say that I typically make sure this, yeah. So if the document contains a signature, if the ID contains a signature, I definitely go ahead and make sure that they match with the knowledge that those electronic signature pads are very difficult to sign. So yes, it is always a good idea to make sure the signature matches, but just, I don't know about you all, but when I'm renewing my ID, my signature on there does not end up looking very pretty. So, but yes, absolutely. Um, be able to do that. And I was just looking at the journal requirements for the passed by the Illinois General Assembly. Um, and so you have to also make sure, I want to make sure that you all in your journal, you have to have your information um, on there as well on the front of your journal. So it has to have things like your name and your commission number, your commission expiration date, and then instructions on what to do if for some reason um, it got lost or there was a case of death, what to do with that journal. So just take a look at that. And in the front, when you open up those journals, especially the hard copy journals in the front cover, you can put in that information there and fill that in. And some of your contact information probably wouldn't be a bad idea. It will not get lost because you're going to take super good care of it, but just in case it does, hopefully it would be a good citizen that would be returning it to you. But you'll also, in the class that you took to become a notary public, they should have informed you that if your journal is compromised, you have 10 business days to let the index department or the Secretary of State know. So definitely do that.
So, did you see the question of how far in advance can we take the course if
Oh,
our expiration date is approaching?
I did not see that. Thank you for that. So the course certificate, great question. Course certificate is valid for 2 years after you pass the final exam. So if you're going to apply to be a notary within 2 years after you take the course, you are good to go. So definitely no more than 2 years, but laws and things do change. So I wouldn't take it too far in advance. But just to let you know, we reapply for to be a study provider yearly, so that the material does change yearly and usually towards the end of the year if it's going to happen. But yeah, and depending on when the new laws would take effect. But no more certainly than 2 years. When they get would you, the before your sorry, my tongue's getting twisted. 60 days before your expiration of your commission, you'll get a piece of mail from the Secretary of State saying it's going to expire. Um, if you're going to take a live class, like mine at City Colleges of Chicago, there's some kind, it can sometimes be full. But if you're going to sign up for one of the asynchronous classes offered out there, then there should be no worries about being able to do that within the 2 month time period. So that would just be a personal piece of advice that I give you. If you prefer a live format, just make sure you do it enough to be able to get into a class that are usually offered monthly or so, and then but otherwise no more than 2 years because that certificate will expire after 2 years. Did I miss any other questions in the chat?
Not that I am aware of. You have done a great job at keeping up at the chat.
Thank you. I try to keep it rolling. So if you are have any questions about what exactly should be in your journal, I would definitely take a look at the administrative code. Um, yes, that's a great question. So when you're putting in your journal, you're going to put where the notarization took place. So where you're standing or sitting during the time of the notarization is that location for time and place, and then their address. Um, there's a field on there to put their address. We talked about that um, a little bit earlier. Um, and I was just double checking that, you know, we've got it keeping 7 years. It's got to be securely bound and have consecutive numbered pages with printed page and entry line numbers. Like I said earlier, it can also be electronic. So you decide whether you want to keep an electronic or paper journal. There are benefits and downsides to both, as there are for most things. Um, so definitely want the name of the principal, which is the person who signed it, right? And then the title or description of the document, the date that you notarized it. You can go ahead and put the um, like whether you're doing a traditional or electronic or remote notarization, go ahead and also make note of any fees that you charge, or if you're marking none, I just put a zero there in the fee section. And then, like you said about the physical location, it is where the notarization took place itself. So same thing for the venue at the top of the certificate. It says state of, county of. That is where the notarization took place. So for example, if you work in Will County but live in Cook County, you would want to, um, you know, wherever you happen to be standing or sitting at that time in the notarization is what the county goes. And you're an Illinois notary public, so we'll always say state of Illinois.
Well, Dalton, thank you so much. We just have a couple minutes left. I greatly appreciate, as I know all of our attendees do as well, the information that you have shared with us today. I think if anybody's got one more question that they can get into the chat, we've got time for one more.
It has been an absolute pleasure. Thanks for your wonderful engagement and your great questions. I can tell that you are very, very mindful notaries, and the Illinois public is lucky to have you. So, thank you very, very much for all that you do. And you are my library people, so keep up the great work.
Thank you again for joining us, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your Thursday.